Good evening. Welcome to this edition of CIC's thought provoking book discussion series. Today we have in our midst Sachin Nanda, whose book Hedgewar, A Definitive Biography, is the topic of discussion. To give you a small introduction about Sri Sachin Nanda, he is a philosopher, a thought leader, and seasoned strategist with a successful career in private equity. Now a trusted advisor to boards, founders, and organizations, he is valued for his ability to distill meta trends and bridge global perspectives with actionable insights. He is deeply connected to his Indian heritage. His transformative experiences exploring India's history and philosophy shape his work. He combines a profound understanding of Indian traditions with Western liberal values, creating a unique perspective that resonates across cultures. As Director General of the International Center for Sustainability, Sachin champions initiatives that align thought leadership, environmental stewardship, and strategic influence to drive sustainable progress. His work demonstrates how sustainability can harmonize people, planet, and profit. We have great pleasure in inviting onto the stage Mr. Sachin Nanda. To discuss the book with him, we have Bharat Gopu, who is an alumni of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. Having spent nearly 30 years in logistics industry, he currently is the founder and managing director of Indoi Group, which is dedicated to the nation. Indoi, among others, organizes the annual Chennai Lit Fest, and he works closely with RSS and takes inspiration from them in every way. Welcome, Mr. Bharat Gopu. Please join us on the stage. On the book, most of you I see have already got a copy, but this has been described as the first definitive biography of Dr. Keshav Baliram Hedgewar, founder of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, an organization, according to the blurb here, that remains a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma to outsiders. And I hope this riddle is unraveled in the conversation that we are going to witness. A little bit about the book again. It's a definitive biography which chronicles the untold story of the enigmatic founder of the Rashtriya Sevak Sangh, whose vision for India's cultural revival continues to shape the nation's socio political landscape. Through meticulous research and vivid storytelling, this biography traces Hedgewar's journey from an orphan child in colonial India to the mastermind behind one of the world's most secretive organizations. Set against the backdrop of a country grappling with colonial rule, rising communal tensions, and the complexities of modernity, this book opens a window to Hedgewar's philosophy of cultural nationalism, his challenges with contemporaries such as Gandhi, Nehru, and Savarkar, and his transformative leadership. It explores his inner struggles to make sense of his own critique of Hindu society. And this is quite important. More than a biography, this work is a window into the labyrinth of India's civilizational ethos, offering a nuanced perspective on the RSS's origin and its impact on India today. Hedgewar, a definitive biography, is a must read for those seeking to understand modern India's complexities through the life of one controversial yet extraordinary man. So, that is for people who have not yet brought the book. I think this will inspire you to pick up a copy. It's right outside. So, without further ado, let me just give you a few words about our organization, the Chennai International Center. Well, we have been organizing such events, and by events, I mean intellectual discussions, book reviews, book launches, and various. We give a platform to speakers from across all genres to come and talk to us and share with us their wide experience. We have been hosting it mostly, earlier days, we used to host it in the Madras School of Economics. Now we host it at this venue or any college venue or school venue. Depending on the speaker, we take them to schools and colleges too. So this is our endeavor to spark. We call ourselves the intellectual spa for the mind. So we try to engage discerning audiences, bring them speakers, and I hope you'll continue to support us as we put up our own center in Mailapo, which is under construction, and we hope to have you all uh, maybe in a year's time in our own center. Without further ado, let me hand it over to Mr. Gopu for carrying on the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Uh, Welcome to one and all. Uh, when he described the book Enigma, uh, my first question, I was talking to Sachin some time back on the telephone, and I was asking him more than anything else. Personally, I want to know what made you spend 7 years researching.
It's well, thank you. First and foremost, thank you for everybody to take some time out this evening and come to this wonderful venue. This is my first time really in Chennai, and it's great to be here. We're on a bit of a whirlwind tour
Yes.
with this book, but I'm really pleased that all of you could join me in this discussion, and thank you to the organizers for actually, and the right terminology there. It's an intellectual spa. I like that. I hopefully today we will all enjoy a good spa session for our mind. So let me jump into your question. Maybe just make some opening remarks. So I'm raised in the United Kingdom. Um, I have a background in philosophy. I did my PhD at Nottingham, and then I did comparative religion in Christian and Islamic theology. I tell you that because without my academic training, both in philosophy and in comparative religion, I don't think some of the nuances that are in this book would have come out. Because I think in order to understand the Hedgewarian worldview, you have to have some um, understanding of both Indian traditions and Western traditions, and you have to have an understanding of what was happening within the Islamic world around the 1920s, post World War One, which I will come to. Maybe we can explore. Yes. Where this all came from was that the first time I came to India, I was 22 years old. And so this is back in 2001, 2002. And I came backpacking here, trying to find my family roots. And since then, I've had the opportunity and I've gradually fallen in love with this country and its culture and its society. And in this journey, I've come here as just a backpacker. I've come here as a student. I've come here on business. I've come here to all sorts of cultural programs. And I have a lot of friends here now. And wherever I went, absolutely wherever I went, uh, uh, tribal villages to chambers of commerce, IITs to primary schools, I would bump into something called the RSS. I mean, it was just everywhere, everywhere. And I don't think, you can go very far in modern India without bumping into something to do with the RSS somewhere, somehow. When I would ask people about the RSS, they would all have very strong opinions. They'd have opinions, but strong opinions. And I noticed that. And those opinions could be good, bad, and ugly. All of it, right? The whole spectrum. But when I would scratch the surface and say, well, okay, these are powerful opinions, tell me some more, why, what, when, I discovered that very few people really understood anything deep about this organization, about this movement. Let me call it a different word, about this phenomena, right? I think the RSS goes beyond an organization. I think that word doesn't quite suit it, right? It's a phenomena, right? It's something that has interwoven itself into the fabric of Indian life, whether Indians know it or not. It's already there. And so I discovered this, and so when I saw that there was this lack of any sort of depth of understanding, but very strong opinions, very polarizing opinions, it got me curious. Furthermore, I was coming in from an outside in perspective. So I was asking, I want to understand modern India. And I want to understand my cultural heritage and my roots. That's the angle I was coming from. But what I discovered very quickly, and my hypothesis for writing this book, is that I don't think anybody, whether you are for the RSS, against the RSS, whether you know it or you don't know it, that's by the by. As far as I'm concerned, in order to understand modern India, you have to understand the RSS. You have to grapple with the RSS. And you have to make sense of it in some shape and form. So that's one. Number two is then you scratch a little bit further into the RSS and you discover that even a lot of RSS folks don't know much about Hedgewar, right? And what makes that unique is that here is a movement, here is a phenomena that is pan-India, cuts across the Indian society in all its diversity and richness, and you have a founder that nobody knows anything about, right? It's like he's in the shadows. He's there. You can feel the Hedgewarian mind everywhere, but you can't put your finger on it. You can't grab it. You can't hold on to it. Um, and so I started to ask questions. When I started to ask questions, I naturally went to RSS literature. Naturally. The first thing I noticed is there's very little in English. Very little. What there is um, books on the biography of Hedgewar which are reverential in nature. What I would call hagiographies, right? They don't show you Keshav Hedgewar as a man, as somebody who has grown up as a human being, and it basically choreographs his actions and frames him in a particular narrative, which was for a particular audience for a particular time. Someone like me would struggle to access any of that, right? So then I went to the academy, both Western and Indian academy. And I studied quite heavily Christoph Jeffrelow's Hindu Nationalism, which is a mammoth piece of work that he wrote in the late 90s.
Yes.
And, commendable piece of work. But what I realized by going through that work was that he had very little access, direct access, primary source material of the Sangh, of the RSS, right? Then what I realized is that the Indian Academy, and therefore then by extension the Western Academy, because the Western academics reference the Indian academics, that there is what I call a vortex of referencing, right? And that vortex of referencing leads you down a rabbit hole, right? And that rabbit hole actually makes Hedgewar and the Hedgewarian mind and his creation, the RSS, more of an enigma.
Yes.
Why does it make it an enigma? Because what they write is that this person is a fascist, he's a hater of minorities, he's a bigot, he's for Hindu supremacy. And these are words that you can find in all
Very
academic,
commonly used words.
very commonly used words. On the other side, on the RSS literature, you will find him as the savior of the Hindus, right? The perfect human being, right? And so on and so forth. And so, how does one really understand this? Because when you see the work of the RSS, you discover that the academy is writing from 60,000 feet above sea level, using that vortex of referencing, which doesn't give you a real tangible understanding of Hedgewar nor his creation.
Correct.
And I thought, how? And initially, when I started writing this, how this happened, I'm going to be honest with you, is that I started complaining.
Okay.
I started complaining. I started complaining to academics. I started writing to Christoph Jeffrellow, and I started challenging. To which, very earnestly, the answer came back: we don't have access to source material, right? We don't have primary material of Hedgewar, of the early RSS. Fine. So I started writing to the RSS pracharaks, karyalays, the NMML here in Delhi,
Yeah.
which I think the name has now changed. And my complaints must have got to the right people, because at some point somebody said to me, well, Sachin, if you're going to complain this much, you might as well write it. And initially I didn't take them seriously. I mean, I'm a guy in London. I'm trying to grapple with India myself. How am I going to write this book and I don't have any access to source material? They said, look, we'll give you access. But will you write it? You write it if you're so bothered by it. So I did, out of curiosity. That curiosity led into a 7-year struggle to really put together the source, the source material, and create the narrative. And here I've tried to bring him alive. If you don't mind, can I share how I did some of the
Yes,
research
please.
methodologies?
Of course, yes.
So some of the research methodologies that I used, you'll find interesting. Um, uh, the British Library is a treasure trove, absolute treasure trove, but you have to spend weeks and weeks and weeks in those archives. And of course, Nagpur, in the RSS headquarters, the Arcadele there's an entire room of archives that are just sitting there, which are now partially in Delhi as well. And then there's the NMML. What I discovered, the kind of methodologies that I had to do was, of course, we had to translate some of his notes,
Yes.
his letters, all of that, because they're in Marathi, Hindi, Bengali,
Predominantly in Marathi.
Marathi. But some of them are also in code.
Yes.
He was writing in code because Hedgewar was basically, he knew he was being watched from a very young age. So Hedgewar lived his entire life with this complexion that everything I write, everything I say is being monitored. And it turns out he wasn't wrong. Because in the British Library, there's lots and lots of little snippets about the not just the early RSS, but the independent struggles, where Hedgewar pops up every now and then. So that's the first thing. You have to you have to decipher all of this. Then number two is, I'll give you an example. I got a map of Nagpur from 1902 from the British archives. And I got to Nagpur with this map in one hand, and I got Google Maps out on the other.
They don't match.
They don't match. And so what I realized was, okay, which streets overlap each other?
Yeah.
And I walked from his house to his school. And I used the exact map of 1902 and Google Maps to walk that. And I tried to identify every single building that would have existed when he walked by. I also identified where exactly all the statues of Queen Victoria were as well at that time, which are no longer there.
Yeah.
His where his school was is now a zoo, right? I walked where he would have gone swimming with his friends, where he would have gone up the hills to play games with his friends. And I even called the forestry department at Nagpur, and they have excellent archives.
Yes.
They kept the records of all the fauna and trees and vegetation that are over 100 years old, 150 years old. So I could also identify the kind of fauna that he would have seen, that he would have been around. And so I did that because I wanted to bring him alive, right? I wanted the reader to see the world as he saw it, for better or worse. That's up to the reader.
From his eyes.
From his eyes.
His times.
What did he see? Then, for example, we know that Hedgewar spent 1 year in prison in 1921. What I did for that, if you read the RSS literature, the hagiographies, what they'll tell you is he went to prison, he's a patriot, he goes into prison, he influences everybody, he comes out even healthier than when he went in.
Far from truth.
Now, when I did my research, I found a video, a black and white video from 1917 in the British archives of the same prison that Hedgewar was sent to.
The same cell.
The same. And in this video, there's no sound, there's only the video material, but it shows you the difference of how political prisoners were treated and how the common prisoner was treated. And what we do know is that Hedgewar chose, even though he was arrested as a political prisoner, he chose to live as a common prisoner.
Yes.
Now, when you see this video, prison life was brutal. It was brutal. It was humiliating, it was abusive, and under the guise of discipline, prisoners were mistreated.
Yes.
And it doesn't surprise me at all when I saw that video and what how Hedgewar must have lived that 1 year, why his health began to fail soon after 1922. It doesn't surprise me because those prisons were tough, especially if you chose to be treated like a common prisoner
Yes.
and not the privileges of a political prisoner. So these things you will discover in the book may give you a different perspective because in that 1 year of prison, his mind really develops, and I'm not surprised again with what happens to him.
The
So
only small suggestion I would like to make is uh, brutal is the mildest expression that you can use. Uh, it was far worse than brutal. Uh, Inhuman is probably closer to the truth. Uh, a lot of people don't realize what Dr. Saab, as he's usually called, what he actually stood for. Partly because I do agree that the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, as Sai has very wonderfully put it, and I know him quite well. Uh, it is, uh, it is from the outside, it looks very secretive and it looks extremely dominating, and it's something which is very tough to enter, understand. They have a lot of rules, regulations. And trust you me, about 8 years back, I had that same opinion. And I had this very stupid thought that people from corporate life are disciplined. We keep our times. Time is money. And we do not like to waste even a minute of our times. Now, in the last 7 years, closer to the last 4 5 years, I have said this publicly. I've put it on Twitter. I've given it in some TV interviews. Also, I've made it very vocal. I've been very vocal about it. That the discipline of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh has put me to shame. So much so that I really, I feel belittled. They say 4:30. They actually mean 4:30. They don't mean 4:31. Uh, when they say let's congregate at 6, whether there is someone, there is no one, that is immaterial. Time, discipline, and uh, the very term Swayamsevak, a lot of people uh, misunderstand the term. Uh, Maybe because the Sangh doesn't go out and explain what a Swayamsevak is. Someone very beautifully told me this a couple of years back that Swayam Sevak is someone who is self motivated, who has zero expectations, and if at all he has expectations, his expectation is to be ridiculed. His expectation is to be chastised for whatever he does. His expectation is to be taken advantage of, but he continues doing it. Now, what amazes me and what I want you to explain about Dr. Saab is what must have motivated him to not just form an organization, but to ensure that 100 years, in less than 100 hours from now, it'll be his birthday. And he shares his birth year with a gentleman called Jawaharlal Nehru. Both of them were coincidentally born in the same year. And it's also the 100th year of the formation or the beginning of Sangh. And when you ask, I know at least 10 people here who are active Swayamsevaks. Uh, you ask them how are they planning to celebrate, and they're like very nonchalant about it. It's like, what celebration? We still have miles to go. We haven't even walked a few yards. I want you to explain what, since you say that you have gone into his mind and you have tried to relive and bring him alive, what must have motivated him to form? Sometimes I find them extremely rigid. I find them um, difficult. But, you know, when I sit down and think it over calmly, I understand that they're right. It's because of the rigidity that they have managed to survive. You name any calamity which might have come on the organization called RSS, they have survived. So, can you explain what might have motivated him to form such an organization which has, in their 100th year, they don't want to celebrate because they think that we have just started.
Yeah.
They want to remain faceless. They want to remain, I know someone who's sitting in the third last row. I'm not even going to look at him because he'll give me a stare. Uh, I've never seen nonchalant people like them. What must have motivated them?
Yeah. I mean, that's really well put, actually. And there's a lot there to unpack, isn't there? Uh, Let me first just say that um, I really and nobody to comment on the contemporary challenges and the contours of what is happening in this country. I still live in 1940, I think, because that's where my research ends. Um, Let me try and explain what I think makes the RSS such a phenomena and the people of the RSS so phenomenal, right? For better or worse, that's up to you, right? For better or worse, up to you. But this phenomena
They stand out in the crowd.
is absolutely right. So a couple of things. One is I found the young Keshav uh, to be a composite. What I mean by that is that we know what he was exposed to as a young teenager. So, of course, he had the hardships of life, the plague, poverty, all of that. We know that. But something else happens, which is often not spoken about. His father figure, once his parents have passed away in 1902 by the plague, they both die on the same day. Just imagine the trauma that does to a 12-year-old, right? Um, but the other side of that is that he basically gets adopted, not in adoption in the sense of we do it today, but in terms of the system of the time.
Taken in.
Taken in is the right word, or the right phrase, by Dr. Munje, who is one of the wealthiest and the men of Nagpur, probably Maharashtra. He's an eye surgeon, he's an ex-British military officer, medical officer, who fought in the Boer Wars. And only during the Boer Wars did he realize what the British were about, what the British Empire was about. And so then he begins to retreat from the British and becomes basically a follower of Tilak, and then gets inspired to give the rest of his life, dhan man dhan, as they say, to the struggle. He, he takes in the young 12, 13-year-old Hedgewar. So suddenly Hedgewar goes from this humble, lower working class Brahmin boy, to suddenly an elite upbringing, an elite education. And I'll just give some stats here. Only 10% of men could read or write when Hedgewar was a young teenager. Only 10%. Only 1% of women could read and write. It's a highly illiterate society, and I don't think we fully appreciate the challenges there, right? So he goes through this. He was composite in the sense that we know the curriculum he had at some of the nationalist schools that he was enrolled into in Yavatmal and these other places in Maharashtra. We know, for example, that he had, by the time he was 15, he had already internalized Manobodh, Dasbodh. These are Marathi pieces of literature which were written by Ramdas, who was the guru of Shivaji, right? Shiva Bhosle, the
It's called
Maratha
Sant
king,
Ramdas.
Sant Ramdas, right? So so he had that. He'd already absorbed many aphorisms from the Upanishads, the Vedas, etc. So that's there, and to some degree, you might argue and say, well, that you'd expect that of somebody of his background, maybe, and his family lineage. However, the other side is we know that by the age of 15, 16, 17, pre-university, he had already read the Greek philosophers. He had read Mazzini, the Italian political thinker. He had read Nietzsche, right? The German philosopher. So he was also absorbing what I call the global winds. He was rooted in his tradition while being open to the world. And I think this is something that often is missed, and we don't talk about it enough. But the Hedgewarian mind, the formative years of that mind, was a composite mind. It was a mixture of the best of indigenous thought while absorbing the best of European thought. And so he was constantly doing this throughout his life, actually, I find. And this is, again, not well understood. So that's one thing. Second thing is, I think what makes Hedgewar so phenomenal is that he was deeply honest about the world that he saw. He was deeply honest. And honesty, I think, it's hard work and it can be painful sometimes. I'll give you an example. So between 1917, 18, right the way up to 1924, Hedgewar actually doesn't have much to say about the British. He doesn't have much to say. I mean, he wrote lots and lots of speeches where he's obviously lambasting the British tyranny and the despotism and all that. But he himself already had categorized what the British were, which was basically they were a symptom of a much deeper problem.
Yes.
Right? All of the foreign invasions that happened to the Indian subcontinent for the last 500, 600, 700 years prior to that, he actually felt that these were all symptoms of a
Yes.
much deeper problem. So he spends a lot of time trying to really frame what has gone wrong with Indian society. Why has Indian civilization gone from such a global power to one of the poorest places on planet Earth?
And a third world country.
And not just third world, but I mean, he saw in one of the famines, the year will escape me now, but this is before the plague, so he's still a young boy. We're talking maybe 8, 9 years old at that time. He would have read about, for sure, but he would have seen how in the rural parts of Nagpur there was such a shortage of food that people were forced to eat grass.
Yes.
Right? He would have seen this. So he wanted to understand what has gone wrong with the Indian society. And what he comes out with, I try and sum up as 3 things: caste, class, and creed. These 3 things, he said, dried up what we would today call maybe Rashtrabhav. Right? Is that the right framing? Rashtrabhav. What I would call from academic circles as social capital. Right? What Robert Putnam calls social capital, which is basically what? Any society, for it to be progressive, to develop in every which way, certain fundamental building blocks are required. One is different people from different backgrounds have to have nodes, i.e., institutions or a culture which allows different people to mix. By mixing, you become friends.
Connecting.
Once you connect, you start building trust. Only on that trust can you become cooperative. And only through cooperation can a society become innovative. And only through innovation can a society become wealthier, become stronger in any which way you think about. Now, think about the Indian society around the 6th century AD. So, I mean, it was a world leader in innovation, no?
Yes.
By the time of the 15th century, India was hardly innovating anything. By the time of the British arrived, 1750, India was already on a downward trajectory. Britain just made that much faster, right? They deindustrialized that much quicker. But the downward slide had already happened. And so, from the Hedgewarian perspective, I believe what he discovers, and it's simple when I say it the way I will say it, he discovers that the fundamental problem with the Indian society, the Hindu society, remember that he had not much to say about anybody else, but he had lots to say about the Hindu society, the critique of it, which is that ultimately the Hindus had become fragmented, fossilized, and therefore they were all compartmentalized into caste, class, or creed. By creed, I mean religious beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? So because these pockets were so isolating, human beings, Indians, could not build relationships between these pockets. People had become fossilized. Slowly, cooperation dries up, trust dries up, innovation dries up, and India becomes vulnerable. India loses touch with the outside world. India starts losing market share. Gold stops arriving into India. Indian innovation falls behind the rest of the world. And so what he does, and this is the phenomenal bit, what he does is he gives you a solution, not just a critique.
Yes.
And the solution he comes out with is social capital. We have to teach Indians to build social capital again. The ability for me and you to sit together. We may be totally different, from totally different backgrounds. We may speak different languages. We may be from different castes or class. But by gaming together, gamification,
Exactly.
by doing activities together. I mean, think about the low barriers to entry to an RSS shaka.
There is no barrier.
There is no barrier. You're asking a bunch of kids to say, come and play sports. That's not a barrier. And in that space, something quite unique happens. And now I'm talking about the early RSS. Hedgewar consciously um, builds a space which is casteless,
Yes.
classless, and creedless. Mahatma Gandhi makes an observation, and he says to Hedgewar in the only conversation they ever had, which was once for 1 hour, is that I noticed there were no murtis in your camps, because the space, although Hindu, was creedless.
Yes.
So he creates a safe space for young boys to come together who are from totally different backgrounds, but in that space,
They're all equal.
you're equal. It's an egalitarian society in that space. That allows the Sangh, the early Sangh, to build social capital rapidly. So suddenly the shakas become a center of social capital. You went to a shaka not because you were a patriot, not in the early days. You went to shaka because you're a kid and you want to play games. But what you realized was that by playing games, I'm meeting some good people. I'm
He
meeting
incentivized the whole idea of coming together.
coming together. And then what he does is quite interesting, is not just social capital. He then points that social capital towards nation building,
Channelizes them.
channelizes them. That actually your job is not just to become good friends and cooperate together and maybe make some money for each other, but your job is then to go and build institutions that will serve others. And hence you start getting all of these RSS men that come out of the shakas, and they go into agricultural movements, they go into labor
All over.
unions, education,
All over.
and they go all over. And today, here we are. It's interwoven into the society. I mean, what a simple concept,
Yes.
but what a powerful way of changing a society. What's the downside? There is, as far as I can see, the downside is nothing, but there is one downside. It takes 100 years to get here, and it may take another 100 years before really India builds enough social capital for it to be a global leader again, right?
What
So-
is 100 years when compared to the centuries of subjugation that we have been subjected to?
Yeah. But I would just say on that, and it's true, you're right when you say it like that. But for a minute, let's be human beings, right? Our lives are 70, 80 years old at max, right? Of which 40 years are the most productive, right? And then somebody tells you, look, I want you to give me all of your spare time. I want you to come here daily, maybe twice a day. I want you to do all these events for the next 20, 30 years, which is the best years of your life. And by the way, you might not make any difference. It will still take another 100 years. That takes a phenomenal mindset.
The people who say yes to that are the Swayamsevaks.
Right. So what seems to occur here, what Hedgewar manages to do, is he does something that I don't think anybody in his contemporary peerage, whether it's Savarkar, Bose, Gandhi, Nehru, none of them managed to create the solution to India's problem.
Yes.
They were all obsessed with the Rajya. Capture the state, will fix the society. Nehru thought of it through socialism. Gandhi thought of it in a different way. Bose thought of it in a different way. Right? Hedgewar says no. The Rajya is secondary. It's the imagined bit. The real is the Rashtra. And that's what we have to focus.
Swarajya is the last part. It's actually Swadharma, Swabhasha, Swarashtra, and then last is Swarajya. You rule only when you have the confidence that you're in a position to rule them without having the baggage of the earlier three.
And also capability.
Yes.
I found
The
something.
filtration process is stringent.
You mentioned something about timing, right? You said that RSS people are obsessed with time, right? They're on punctual.
It's not obsessed. That's the way of life for them.
But that's what I'm saying, right? So that to me is capacity building.
Yes.
That's capacity building, right? So these are the phenomenal things that I find fascinating about this movement and how it has spread and why it spread. And ultimately, what I would say is the magic ingredients of the RSS is social capital. It brings people together who otherwise would never come together.
It's not forbidden, it's not written anywhere, but I have yet to come across any person associated with the RSS directly ever asking me my caste, subcaste, or my mother tongue. They really don't care for all that. And trust you me, even if I introduce myself, they quietly walk away from there because they don't want to hear anything. They just want to hear, are you committed? If you're committed, they will put you to test in a very silent way. It's not even considered a test. It's just a filtration process which you have to go through, and it's something natural for them. But coming back to Dr. Saab, a lot of people, because there has been no clinical decodification, I would say, of Dr. Saab, a lot of people find it very difficult to understand what RSS stands for, or the man behind the RSS. You understand you understand the human behind the organization, and you understand what the organizational values will be. So I've read through excerpts of the book, and what do you think might have motivated him in the 1920s, very specifically between 1922 and 1925, when he officially started uh, what is today called the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh? But what do you think happened between that specific period of 1922 and 25, post him coming out of the incarceration that he was subjected to?
It's a great question. Yeah. I mean, so what I find about Dr. Hedgewar is that he experiments, right? He doesn't sit under a tree and it just comes and voila, we have
No
the perfect
eureka
model,
moment.
right?
No eureka moment.
No eureka moment, right? He experiments. And between that period, 1922 to 1925, he's experimenting, right? He launches a publication. He actually tries to fix the Congress. He actually says to the Congress, hey, let's fix our volunteers, our workers. He does this first, right? And he realizes this is a no-go. It doesn't work, right? And so he's in a stage of experimentation, right? He's very clear about that. And so one of the things you discover about the person is that he's not frightened to get things wrong and fail. And he does fail a lot of times. It's not that everything just happened and it was all correct. He struggles. I mean, there's a bit of struggle there. That's one. The second thing is what he's doing at this time is he's acutely watching the ruptures. And in the after World War I, the ruptures in Indian society begin. He's watching the ruptures. What I mean by the ruptures is that the Indian society pre-World War One was very, very tentatively kept together, very tentatively. One, the British state was all powerful, and it was a despotic state. And remember that most Indians would have never seen a white person in those days, and people don't appreciate this. The average Indian would have never seen a white person at the time of Hedgewar. Hedgewar only for the first time sees an Englishman when he goes to Calcutta. Because if you look at the numbers of the English that were actually in this country ruling, is tiny.
Less than a million.
Less than a million. Way less than a million. Way less than a million. Right? I've got the numbers in here. It was Indians being used to subjugate Indians.
Yes.
And so Hedgewar watches all of this, and of course after 1918, as the British state retreats, because the British state is now almost bankrupt after World War One. Like anybody who's running out of cash, you make cuts. And so they made cuts in the British administration.
Yes.
Police numbers were cut. The judiciary were cut. Law and order in many parts of rural India and certain suburban India collapses. Law and order collapses. When law and order collapses, what do you think happens? Well, we know what happens, even in today's 21st century. When law and order collapses, people become pretty...
It's a free-for-all.
It's a free-for-all. And old grievances come out. Aspirations come out. Ambitions come out. Some of them are very vile ambitions. And so all this happens. Greed comes out. And so he's watching the ruptures between 1918, but 1922 to 1925. And one of the things that really catalyzes him, and if you don't mind me sharing, it's in the book, there's a whole chapter on it, but is what the euphemism that I see, what they call the Mapila riots. I would call it the Mapila massacre. And in fact, that was the original name the British gave it. They called it the Mapila massacre. Then it was scribbled out and said, we'll call it riots. Yeah. Do you know why? To appease the INC.
Specifically, few people in
Specifically, yes, quite right. And so that particular incident of 1921, what happened in Kerala? At that time, Hedgewar is in prison, but Munjay is on the ground. And Munjay is writing letters prolifically to the young Hedgewar in prison that this is what is happening. And then, of course, when he comes out of prison, he obviously finds people who were forced out, what happened. He meets Munjay. That, I think, was a very much a crystallizing moment for him with what is to come. What is to come. And so I think, unlike a lot of his contemporaries, I think Hedgewar knew the challenges that India was about to face between then and then we say 1947. Of course, at that time, we didn't know it was 1947. Yeah. But I think he sees this. And so one of the things that he realizes is time is running out. I think what he realizes is time is running out. And that because obviously we know that from early 1930s, 32 maybe, it's in the book, but 32, he basically starts writing to Munjay.
Yes.
And he starts saying that my biggest concern is that this country will be fragmented. In 1930s.
1932.
1932. So he can see it, right? Now, because he can see it, he's thinking, and his contemporaries are like, nah, it's not going to happen. What are you talking about? Not going to happen. So one of the things that he does is, therefore, he goes into this acceleration that we need to fix the Indian society quickly. And so I think that's where he finally has the courage, and it does take courage, right? To say to your father figure, to say all the people that have propped you up all this time, looked out and say, actually, I think all of you are doing fine. You carry on. I'm going to do something different. It takes a lot of courage. Conviction. And also, remember, some of the steps he took were unpopular.
Yeah.
He was not applauded.
In those times.
In those times, right? His own community gives him a hard time for creating a casteless bubbles, right? These shakas. The RSS camps were casteless, and so he gets a lot of stick for this, right? And we forget again, the early RSS shakas were done in English, right? They were built on the British military model. So these things we often forget that these subtleties were there, but he essentially sees the world in front of him unfold, and he predicts it more accurately than any of his contemporaries. And I think history shows that now in hindsight,
Yes,
right?
in
In
hindsight, yes.
hindsight,
History has been unkind to him for
yes.
the last 7 decades. Let's hope the forthcoming history is kind to him, forthcoming years. Uh, Sachin, two questions interwoven actually. I understand from reading excerpts of your book his relationship with Vinayak. Dam- it's tough for common person to understand what might have been uh, a great relationship, a great friendship to begin with, and then subsequently they had their differences, but they respected each other all through their lives. Uh, they might have differed on their ideological points, but they never disrespected each other. And uh, also the kind of discipline the followers of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh followed during the last few decades of the freedom struggle. Two parts. One
Yes,
is his relationship with
Savarkar.
Mr. Savarkar, and the last 2 decades of the freedom struggle, which a lot of people can claim that what they say today famously as the Sangh was not part of the freedom
Mm.
struggle is so far away from truth that it's as different as cheese and chalk. Uh,
That on the first part, I plead ignorance in the sense that I sometimes miscalculate how sensitive these topics are in India. I'm just going to say it as I saw it from the data points.
Freedom of expression still exists.
Thank God. Um, from my understanding, and again, there's a whole chapter dedicated to this book, where in 1939 onwards, 938, 939, Hedgewar gets lambasted by Hindu Mahasabha for not being patriotic enough. You're not Hindu enough, is what they said to him, right? Which today we can laugh at, we can kind of have a smile about. But at that time, it's quite an interesting thing, right? In fact, this book has a lot of tongue in cheek, by the way. It's not all serious. There's lots of fun in it. So the chapter is called "Not Fascist Enough,"
Yeah.
right? So
17th chapter.
yes, that's right. Oh well, you have read it. So in that, look, couple of things really interesting. So Hedgewar goes to school, his medical college, his medical friend is Narayan Savarkar, Vinayak Savarkar's younger brother. Hedgewar is actually very close to both Narayan Savarkar and Ganesh Savarkar, his older brother. So Vinayak's older brother. So Hedgewar is in touch with both of these brothers throughout his life. Very close friends, right? The middle brother, as far as I can see, they didn't see eye to eye. The personalities didn't rub, right? Sometimes you can intellectually agree with someone,
Yeah.
but you just don't like each other. That happens, right? We've all been through that. Where you intellectually get it, like I accept you, intellectually I get your ideas, I just don't like the way you work. Well, I feel that Keshav Hedgewar and Vinayak Savarkar were of that ilk. So, in 1924, when Savarkar writes Hindutva, it gives Hedgewar the lexicon to express his inner world.
Yes.
So, in that sense, there's no doubt about it that Vinayak Savarkar's words, his literary genius, and I think he's a literary genius, definitely gives Hedgewar the expression, the tools of expression to express what he wanted, right? What he was seeing. And there was therefore huge respect that way. Number one. But the solution to the critique, they both differed. Savarkar was a political nationalist. Hedgewar transitions into cultural nationalism. One is for the Rajya. We must dedicate all our resources to capture the Rajya. The other says, no, we must channel our resources for the Rashtra. There lies the difference, right? And it's a subtle difference, but it's a really significant difference, right? And so in 1939, Savarkar, obviously, Vinayak Savarkar is quite a fiery character, right?
Yes.
I mean, let's be frank about it. So he writes in a quite a heated op-eds in the Maratha newspaper, and he name calls Hedgewar and says, "What is he playing at? What is he doing? We know he's a patriot, but he's not patriotic enough, right? Why does he not support the Hindus, etc., etc., etc." Hedgewar obviously is pretty, he's not just taking this all in like a renunciate, he's obviously like, what is going on here? We're meant to be on the same side. But look at the beauty of those times. You've just been publicly called out in the newspaper,
And you respond privately.
Hedgewar goes to see him. Number one. Number two, he invites Savarkar to give the keynote address in 1939 to the OTC camp. So the man that you've just said is not doing enough publicly invites you to go and give the keynote speech to all the RSS graduates of the OTC at that year. I think there's a lot to learn in modern India from those times.
It still happens.
Right?
It still happens.
So this is the beauty that is subtle. So I think that's the Savarkar question. Your second part was about the freedom struggle and the involvement of Hedgewar or the RSS.
The silent involvement of not just Dr. Saab, but also people who followed his ideology.
Yes. So here we need nuance. And I find that Indian discourse sometimes doesn't do justice to the nuances. Hedgewar writes a letter, and this is the bit that gets, by the way, referenced a lot. He writes a letter, and he tells all the Sangchalaks, and he tells them that the RSS is not going to support the Satyagraha movement. That letter is there. But there's also a circular that goes around to all the shakas at the time that says any Swayamsevak that wants to go and support the Satyagraha is welcome to go. I'm going. That circular is missed out. Right? So here you have nuance. See, he's clear that the RSS as a movement, as an organization, is for the Rashtra. It was already for the Rashtra. It no longer wants to be connected to the freedom struggle in that sense, because that's after the Rajya, right? The INC, the Hindu Mahasabha, all of these movements were all about political activism to capture the Rajya. That is the end goal. The RSS is no longer designed for that. He wants to design it. He's still in the early stages. He wants to design it for something much longer term, much more deeper, and it goes back to his critique that we spoke about the Indian character and Indian society at large. Having said that, look at the subtlety of the man, right? The individual is free to do what is in their heart. If anybody wants to go and support the Satyagraha, off you go. Isn't that, these are the subtleties.
I have a very simple yes or no question for you on this. You've spent 7 years doing research. So do you now genuinely believe that the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh is truly secular in the right sense of, in the correct interpretation of the word secular?
From the Hedgewarian perspective, yes.
And would I be wrong if I say that every Swayamsevak has absolute freedom in his personal space to vote for anyone they want to, or follow any kind of political ideology, but they are still connected to the Sangh? Is that right? Would I be right or wrong?
Again, let me caveat that. I won't comment on current here and now.
No, I'm not talking about the current.
The Hedgewarian perspective, yes, 100%.
We're
100%.
talking purely from Dr.
I'll give you
Saab's point of view.
100%. I'll give you an example of it. In the early RSS, you had orthodox Brahmins at one end of the camp, orthodox Brahmins, right? And you had hard socialists and communists who were Swayamsevaks, all going to the OTC camp together,
Yeah.
training together, going to Shaka together, fighting together, playing together, eating together, right? So the RSS from its very get-go is a broad pantheon of ideas. And what's interesting is this: the popular academy, the popular imagination, and sadly, let me be a little critical. Sadly, I think the modern RSS has slightly internalized this, that they think it's a top-down organization, that they think that somehow, and let me just have a bit of fun. Mohanji Bhagwat sits on a throne with lots of buttons, and he presses buttons, and millions of Swayamsevaks run around doing
Trust
things.
me, that's far away from
Right?
truth.
It doesn't work like that. From day dot, the Hedgewarian mind was clear that the individual is important. Every individual matters. And the entire model of the Shaka was built to build up the individual.
Correct.
Right? Only when the individual has capacity that you can build enough social capital to build a community. And only through a community will you build cooperation to be an innovative society. Right? So the individual matters, number one. Number two, therefore, the individual always had the freedom to follow their heart and their mind. The pointedness of that social capital was Rashtrabhav, right?
Yes.
The ability to build the nation, rebuild the nation. But you could be a communist, you could be an atheist, you could be a religious Orthodox Brahmin.
The single thing which brought people together was the bhav.
Yeah.
The rest was immaterial to him.
Immaterial to him.
We'll open up for
Please.
question and answers.
Hi, Sachin. The question is for you. My name is Ganapati. I work as a content writer for a startup here. The question was, you had made it a point to research on Hedgewar and then finally ended up with the book. My question is, why did you want to start in the first place?
Yeah.
When you said you came to India as a backpacker and then you got embroiled in everything, what was the starting point? And
Very simple. I just want to understand modern India. I really do. And at that time, I was thinking about it from a selfish perspective. My family roots are here. So, what is this country about? The culture, the history, one. Number two, then I came as an investor. I wanted to understand from a policymaker's perspective, from somebody who sat on credit committees, how do you risk India? Right? And what I discovered was that you couldn't really understand modern India without understanding this phenomena. That's it.
And would it be fair to say that now you are able to make some decisions, even for the risk point of view?
So funny you say that. So the center that I now I'm developing, called the International Center for Sustainability. One of the things that we're doing is we're working with the City of London, which is where, by the way, 60% of the world's capital sits. We're actually, I am beginning at the early stages. It will take a few years, but we're at the early stages of building new risk models for the City of London that will re-risk India. And my suspicion is that the social capital that things like the RSS build will de-risk India. That's my bet. But yes, to your point, I'm working in that direction.
Hi Sachin, my name is Anant Narayan. My question is, you spoke about the fragmentation which Hedgewar foresaw in the 1930s, which happened in 1947. Do you think the greatest success of the Hedgewar's philosophy was that we never had any partition or any fragmentation after the 1947? We never lost any territory. The nation never lost territory, though we came very close to that in 1990 in Kashmir, and of course in Northeast. We had challenges in Northeast. And this, I say this, the Sangh had to pay a very heavy price to keep the nation unity, to ensure that there was no further fragmentation of this country on religious lines or any other lines. So do you think that?
Your question takes me into areas where I'm no longer an expert. So I can't comment too much on it. The only thing I will say is, look, the movement, the momentum that Hedgewar started, he dies in 1940. Independence happens in 1947. Partition that he saw in the 1930s didn't happen 7 years after his death. Um, so, but I think it's quite clear that when I read, for example, even the archives in Goa, about how, how the islands of Divdaman were liberated, right? They were liberated by RSS Swayamsevaks, right? Who basically said, enough's enough, we're going to kick the Portuguese out,
Even
right?
Goa.
And Goa, right? So you clearly they played a role in that, and clearly it's been a journey. The only thing I would say though is, um, even though the RSS has gone strength to strength over the decades, um, I actually think India's somewhat of a miracle because of its people, in spite of its state. So I think the people are there, not just an organization.
We have just enough time for one last question, please.
So religion has always been a tool for political organization around the world historically. So how does Hedgewar like essentially tap into this when he starts his organization, right? Then the second question is that caste is a reality of India. So outside the Shaka, what kind of activities does he do to break this outside the Shaka? The third, can you little bit talk about the women in his life, and also like was he supportive of like widow remarriage, education for women, etc.?
Thank you, Sachin. I haven't read the book because I wanted to hear you first before reading the book, not have a preconceived notions of what you already read. My question relates to the Bharat Mata. When did the concept of Bharat Mata come into the minds of Dr. G?
Good question.
And was the original creation of Bharat Mata by Arindam Nath Tagore, was it the same Bharat Mata or was it any different? Question number two, Dhwaja. What is it? Is that the bhava or is it different? Thank you.
Gosh, that's 6 questions.
Take them for the last question.
Well, we've only got 6 questions.
A short observation. You mentioned about the country functioning in spite of the state. I think that's why Galbraith called India a functioning anarchy. The question is, I'm a former central banker who was time between Kerala and Chennai, and in a recent television debate in Malayalam, one CPM cadre, sort of follower, he made a observation. He was complimenting the RSS, but for the wrong reasons. But what he was saying was that RSS is perhaps the only organization which in the last 100 years has not only survived but has not split. And of course, he said the reason he said this is because it is a top-down organization. That's the wrong reason why he said. So this is an observation which I did not find even in the Anderson and Damle's 2 books. So how do you explain this longevity of?
Okay, so longevity. Okay, easy as that then. And all in 5 minutes. I could take that. So there were some. So if we start with just yours, because I think that the last question first, I suppose. Very quickly, from the Hedgewarian perspective, I'm not commenting on modern times. From the Hedgewarian perspective, the Sangh is meant to be a highly decentralized, autonomous set of units that work independently of each other on the genius of localism. Right? That's how it was designed to be, and you can clearly see that in when he's giving his instructions to his early karyakartas. The idea is, don't keep asking me what you have to do. You figure it out. You build the capacity in yourself to then serve the people of your community.
That's Swayamsevak.
Right? So the number one is it survives. It doesn't split into, I think, many different movements because it's a decentralized movement to begin with. Right? It's an autonomous movement where people work according to their own genius, and as they see the needs arise in their society, they respond to it, right? And then the Sangh provides the social capital for any one of their members who decides that, oh, we have a problem in agriculture, we should solve this problem by doing X. Then the entire Sangh will give you social capital to solve that
Capacity
problem.
building is done.
It's done, right? So the Sangh only does capacity building. The rest is done on individual proactivity, I suppose, right? So that's that. Then that's the reason why the Sangh hasn't, I think, divided, which is again makes it unique in Indian society, which is often very hierarchical, I find. But okay. Number two, then, so your questions then will come to. So, Dwaj first, right? So from there's a section in this book where I talk about the Dwaj and what it represents, right? So from the Hedgewarian perspective, and remember where Dr. Ji's imagination would have come from with the Dwaj, would have been from Shivaji, right?
Sant Ramdas.
Sant Ramdas, Shivaji, that would have been his earliest formation, that this Dwaj, this Kesari flag, is a symbol of the culture of this land. Given that he set up a cultural, a organization on cultural nationalism, naturally the flag he felt, which was suitable for this movement, was a cultural flag, one that would embody the entire diversity of this land, right? So he chooses an age-old symbol to represent the Dwaja, and the Dwaja is a guru, right? The weighty one, the one from whose light you are meant to change your character and develop your personality. So Dwaj becomes a very early part, and the reason why he didn't put himself as a guru, or the reason why he didn't put somebody else as a guru, is because he fundamentally knew human beings are flawed, right? And he too was self-critical. He knew his own frailties, right? So he didn't want to create. The word is he uses vyakti puja, right? He doesn't want to put a person in the front, right? So that's the Dwaj bit.
There's no eulogizing the human
Correct.
or idol worshipping.
Yeah, and even to this day, right? I mean, sometimes I sense it, but the human being is a human being, right? Even Mohan Bhagwat should be treated as a human being, right?
He's criticized by Sangh, and it's there for people to read because it gets published within the Sangh also.
Right. So that's, and then you had another question. Bharat Mata. That's a really good question. So we know that Hedgewar he never met Tagore. We know that they never actually met each other. But we know that Aurobindo Ghosh and Hedgewar deeply admired Aurobindo Ghosh. And we know that Aurobindo Ghosh and Tagore had met. Right? And so this notion of Bharat Mata is actually age-old. It's very, very old. It gets expressed by Rabindranath Tagore in a modern sense, which I think appeals to Hedgewar. Now, I don't know if there's a direct connection. I don't know is the answer. But certainly, yeah, still a mystery, but those memes were in circulation. This was not unique to Hedgewar, right? Those memes were already a binding agent within. For example, when he went to Bengal with the secret societies, we know that the Anushalan Samiti, maybe my pronunciation is wrong, Anushalan Samiti, they would also, before they would go and do an assassination, they would go and pay homage to Bharat Mata. We know that. So this clearly is beyond Tagore, but Tagore would have played a role in all of this. But I think the idea was already there. So that's that one. I think I've answered your question, sir, right? Yeah. And then, sir, you gave 3 questions. One was on women. Let's tackle that very quickly. So on that particular topic, there's a few things. One, Hedgewar was quite in his critique of Hindu society, in his critique of Indian society, he does call out on numerous occasions the position of women in Indian society. Right? My contention, and I say so in the book, is that the position of women in India of his times was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. I mean, it was not just a highly illiterate 50% of the population, but it was a part of the society that was almost voiceless. We know, for example, widows got a very hard time of Indian society of those times. I mean, we just know that we've got the numbers for it, we've got the data points for it. He was worried about that because he understood that without building the same social capital, the same capacity in 50% of the population, you can't have a nation. You can't have a flourishing society. So he was clear. However, he was also clear with just where his starting point was. His starting point was so low, the society, I mean. An example which I describe in the book is that he becomes a medical student. He volunteers for a cholera outbreak nearby Calcutta. In this cholera outbreak, both men and women are suffering from cholera and the dysentery. They have medication to treat people, patients. The culture and the custom of those times was that a male doctor could not treat a woman. There were no women doctors. So thousands of women died needlessly because male doctors were not allowed to administer the medication that they needed. That scarred him. Now, when a society is that far back, for him to then go and not only start a radical movement for young men, but then to start a radical movement for young women would have just been impossible. I mean, he would have just been rejected by his own. It would have been a non-starter. So he waits patiently for 10 years. And he waits for a woman to emerge that says, hey, we should be building
she takes
the social...
it upon herself to
Yes,
start.
we should be building social capital for women too, right? And so Lakshmi Kelkar turns up in 1936. She is inspired because her two boys go to the local shaka and she sees the changes in them. And so she goes, well, hang on, I've seen the changes in my boys. Why aren't we doing this for my girls or our girls? And so essentially Hedgewar gives one of his lieutenants, Joshi, to Lakshmi Kelkar and says, you train her, then says to Lakshmi Kelkar, you now start building the social capital for women. Let me go one step further, and this, I don't mean it to be controversial, this is just my conjecture. This is my conjecture. From the Hedgewarian perspective, if the society was ready, both men and women would have been in the shakas together.
Yes.
Both men and women would have been co-building this nation together in unison. But because the society wasn't ready, he had to start where he started. At some point, I'm conjecturing, I could be wrong, and I might become very unpopular, but I suspect and I guess that if this movement, phenomena keeps on going, I can see increasingly men and women within the RSS movements just becoming one. Because that's the Hedgewarian mind. That's the women question. You asked another question, sir. What was it? Caste. Oh, outside the shaka. The Hedgewarian view is very simple as far as I can tell. We will only run shakas. We will only build human beings, the capacity of human beings. Then what you do outside the shaka is your genius. You do it. Your proactivity. That's it. And so he left it to the individual human beings to see the problems, analyze the problems, and then you fix it. Which is why what happens is very quickly between 1930 and 1940, you see lots and lots of young men leave the shaka. They don't attend daily shaka, but they start off multifarious organizations all over Maharashtra. A lot of it dealing with caste. A lot of them actually end up supporting Savarkar's casteless movements. So actually the engine that Hedgewar starts in 1925 already begins to show dividends by 1930, 1932, 1933. And so these Swayamsevaks ripple across Maharashtrian society, fighting caste in various different forms, but they don't call it the RSS. So RSS is, Hedgewarian RSS I'm talking about, is very clear. We will just produce people, let the people figure out what to do next. That's
On that note, I think Sachin deserves a standing
Thank you so much.
ovation
No.
for his research
Thank you.
and for spending 7 years
No,
researching
thank you so much.
and writing about it.
Really appreciate
Thank you
your
so
time.
very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you.
I hope
Thank
you all enjoy the book.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was indeed a fascinating spa for the mind. Thank you. We have to thank Bharat for very, very deftly handling the entire conversation. Very quiet, but at the same time interjecting at the right moment and then leading the conversation on. I think we are thankful to Bharat for doing a commendable job. Thank you, Sachin, and we hope that this is just the beginning of your writing career, and we see many more volumes coming out from your fertile.
The first one has taken 7. The next one should not take
Should
more
not
than a
take that
couple of
long. Yeah, yeah. And we will be happy to host you here whenever you're out with your next production.
Thank you so much.
Moving on, I would like to tell you about our platform. We are next meeting on Sunday, and we go to the diagonally opposite topic of Lal Bahadur Shastri. We have a book on Lal Bahadur Shastri, the great conciliator, and that would be at the Vidyasagar Auditorium on the 30th. This was Vidyasagar Auditorium, for those of you who are not familiar, is next to the Madras School of Economics within the same in Kotur Puram. We hope to see you there. Apart from that, we have a series of events that we have planned. On April 5th, we have Dr. Muthukumar Sami talking about the culture of the Mahabharata Kutu, which is a tradition, a living tradition in almost hundreds of villages around Chennai, which we are hardly aware of. So I would invite you to come there. This is the April 4th, 5th. Then we have the April 12th, we have Sindhu Saraswati Research and Tamil Culture. Are we missing something? This is by Madhusudanan. He's a brilliant orator, and I'm sure you'll enjoy his session too. On the April 19th, we have a different topic, which is by Jayashree Venkatesan on the wise use of wetlands. On the April 26th, we have Bharat Raman, who has written a brilliant book on the CSK, on the Chennai Super Kings. So sports lovers, please turn up. I think this is his second book on the CSK, and that will be an interesting discussion that you can have with him. On May 3rd, we have Nirmala Lakshman, and she will be talking. She's written a scholarly book on Chennai, and we'll have an opportunity to interact with her on May 3rd. On May 10th, we have an interaction with one of the oldest Tamil magazines in Tamil Nadu, which is the Kalaimagal. So we have a lot in store for all of you. Please do come, encourage us to do more and more as we bring eminent authors, scholars, academicians to this platform. I hope this riddle, the enigma, and the mystery has been slightly demystified for all of you, and after you read the book, probably you'll be fully clear on what this whole philosophy is. I think there's been very little written about it, very little discussed about it. Everyone thinks it's a taboo, a subject which everyone goes silent as soon as you start mentioning it. I'm sure such efforts will bring different streams of thought to the public discourse, and we'll have more healthier discussions as we go and understand these philosophies instead of just criticizing with what little we know. Thank you very much for being here, and we'll love to see all of you at our future events too. Thank you.